Recording in progress.
Okay, pnawn da a croeso pawb.
Afternoon and welcome everyone. I'm Councillor Charlie McGoobry and I am leader of the council.
Welcome everybody to today's meeting, which is a hybrid meeting. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live streaming fail, the meeting will continue and recording will be available through the council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. Can I remind members that translation facilities are available for those attending on Zoom to choose the language of your choice. For those wishing to speak in the chamber, please raise your hand. For those on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. We will alternate between speakers in the chamber and on Zoom. For those attending remotely, please note that those in the chamber will be unable to use the chat facility. Committee members who are attending remotely are required to leave their camera on throughout the debate and when voting in order to maintain the integrity of the decision-making process. If you do need to leave the meeting temporarily, pop a message in the chat function so the Democratic Services Officer is aware and then let us know when you return. I expect everyone present participating in this meeting to conduct themselves appropriately and be respectful to each other. That applies to members, officers and anyone in the public gallery. So we'll move on to agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence.
Apology received from Councillor Chris Cater.
Okay, no other apologies? No. Agenda item 2, Declaration of British Code of Local Government. Members are reminded they must declare the existence and nature of their declared personal interest. Councillor Cromwell.
I have a property that I rent out to my son. Does that come under anything to do with council tax that I need to declare?
It's the responsibility of your son, so I would expect so. That'll bring in Matt.
No, this is for council tax. That's
all today.
There's nothing that relates to
Not part of this.
particularly property exemptions or anything like that. Councillor Brown.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I would like to declare a personal interest in the Education Portfolio 7.1. I'm a LEA governor at Escol Glangella, so therefore that would be a personal interest, not prejudicial, so I will remain in the building. Nigel?
Just for clarification, that item on the Escol Ivorid and Myasowen, I'm not a governor, but I am a local elected member. I think it matters. No.
No, it wouldn't do that.
Councillor Paul?
Yeah, I'm the same, Charlie. I'm a LEA governor with St Elvods on the amalgamation.
Okay.
Yeah, just if I may, leader, just to confirm that the reason that's personal only is because of a specific exemption in the code which says that bodies that members have been nominated to by the authority will only be personal and not prejudicial.
Got Councillor Bernice online. Councillor Bernice?
Sorry, the same as Councillor Smith, but I am a school governor.
Okay, which school is that, Bernice?
Escol Ivorid.
Okay.
And the amalgamation with Escol Myasowen.
Okay, no problem. So it's another personal interest. No other declaration of interest. So we'll move on to agenda item 3, which is urgent matters. I'm not aware that we have any. Right? No. Okay, so agenda item 4 is announcements by the leader. I'm sure you will all have heard the really good news that Venue Cymru has been eligible to basically apply for the £10 million of funding. I'd like to take the opportunity to read the letter received from Alex Norris MP, who's the Parliamentary Undersecretary for State for Local Growth and Building Safety. Dear Councillor McGoobry, following consideration of your response to the consultation announced at the Autumn Budget 24, I'm delighted to let you know that we've now decided to approve the funding provisionally awarded to Venue Cymru in March 24. The extremely challenging fiscal environment this government inherited meant that many difficult choices have been required on how to prioritise funding within extremely tight budgets. Indeed, you'll be aware that these projects were originally announced but unfunded as part of the Levelling Up Culture and Capital funding announced by the previous administration. The valued input from you and others into this process has helped us to make decisions based on a fuller understanding of relevant factors, including the impacts withdrawing funding would have and other factors such as maximising economic growth. My department's relentless focus on finding efficiencies and securing value for money has provided an opportunity to unlock funding for a limited number of additional culture projects. Following our consultation process, we reviewed the findings and will be prioritising funding for your project. I fully understand that the consultation process would have caused uncertainty, and I want to offer my personal thanks for your cooperation and engagement throughout. Now, this consultation process is concluded. I look forward to seeing the positive impact this funding will have within your local community and beyond. My part officers will be in contact with your officers shortly to confirm next steps, including requirements for business cases, before we reach final agreement and any monies can be released. So we'll all agree that's really, really positive news. Culture is something that's vitally important, but really salient point here is it contributes just under £30 million to our local economy. So it's vitally important for the town, the county and the region as a whole. Now, it talks about the work that we've done. I really want to recognise the work our officers done, Portfolio Dillon and Councillor Emily has worked really hard on this, and a really special thanks to our MP, Claire Hughes, because she's been really invaluable in working and raising how important this project is for the area. So thanks to them all. But bit of work to be done yet in terms of the business case, but really positive news for us all. So thank you everybody who was involved. That's that from me. Any announcements by the Chief Executive?
Very quickly, just to echo really the work that's gone on by the team, Amanda, Sarah, and the whole team. It's been a bit of a roller coaster, as we all know, but they've acted so professionally throughout and provided the information that requires, you know, a very high quality justification was provided a few months ago. So I'm really pleased for the team, really, that their work has paid off. So diolch yn fawr iawn.
Okay, members, so we'll move on to the first substantive item, which sits within my own portfolio. It's 6.1. It's the revised capital programme 24-25, and this is a Q3 monitoring report, which you'll find on pages 4 to 21. So if we can just take you to page 5, it gives the report details. You'll note in 3.1 that the capital programme approved by Cabinet on the 26th of November last year was £102.194 million. Since the last report, there have been further amendments to the capital programme with a net increase of 4.264 million. So those are set out in Appendix 1. Of those amendments, democratic approval has already been received for 2 projects totaling 1.581. You'll note that both of those are to be funded out of capital receipts. So we're now have to approve the remaining amendments, which total 2.683 million. Very pleasing to note that off that 2.58 million will be funded by external grants, with only £98,000 coming from the council's resources. So table 1 sets out the revised capital programme together with how it is actually financed. In Appendix 1, you have more detail about the amendments and the projects that are there. And Appendix 2 gives detail of every single scheme that we do throughout the service, and also the actual spend in year. You will be aware that many of these projects are over multiple years. So in the year to date up to December 24, the spend was £19.620 million. I think it's really important that we note that the breadth and depth of the work that's been carried out on these various schemes throughout the county. I think one area I would really like to highlight is a remarkable amount of work we've done to improve flood defence to protect thousands of properties from fluvial and coastal flooding. In the last 5 years alone, we've attracted investment of £73.5 million to carry out this work, with Conway contributing 15% of the overall costs. To date, that's protected just over 2,000 houses, and I had the pleasure of visiting the site works in Kimnall Bay, a really major engineering project, which will again protect thousands more houses. And anyone who remembers the devastation of the Town floods way back in 1990 will know how vitally important that is. And as I say in Ross and Sea, it also brings real tangible benefits to our coastal realm, which has been really appreciated by our residents and visitors as well. So with that said, I'll just move back to page 5, members, and I'll look to move the recommendations, which were supported by scrutiny yesterday. Sorry, the recommendations for Cabinet are 2.2 to approve amendments of 2.683 million, which increase the total capital programme. 2.3 to note the total capital programme of 106.458 million and the third quarter capital outturn position for 24-25. So I shall open that up to any questions, comments, or observations, members. Emily.
Yeah, I think these have all had quite good airing, haven't they? But I think it's there's nothing in there that anyone has had particular objection to. I think it's been supported by scrutiny, so I'm very happy to second your proposal.
Okay, members, just note, let's say we did have a good 3-hour session in scrutiny yesterday, so it has been discussed at length, and I'm sure you're all very proud of the work that your services are doing individually and collectively. So we've had a proposer, we've had a second. Can members show for in favour of accepting the recommendation? Okay. Okay, so we'll move on to the second part, 6.2, which is the revenue budget 24-25 Q3 monitoring report. You'll find that on pages 22 to 23. Okay, so again, if we can move to page 23, which contains the report details. I set out in paragraph 3.1, appendix 1 gives all the full detail in terms of projected outturn across the activities of the council, the revised budget, and our latest projected outturn and projections for where we'll be moving forward. I think the highlight figures noted in 3.2 is that projected outturn is now 1.225 million net across all services. So this is a significant improvement on the second Q2 projection when the forecast was in excess of 5.44 million. So in terms of where that's improved in 3.3, you note that across all services apart from social care, the position is either consistent the previous quarter or it's actually improved. So that's incredibly positive and kind of shows how hard we're all working to drive that spend down. However, the projected out for social care has worsened again this quarter, which is a real concern. Now, that is all about demand for services. And one of our head of services, we have good control of the costs. What we can't control is the numbers and the complexity of the people that we look after. That also will have a significant effect moving forward next year because obviously that demand does not go away. We know just in terms of figures, there's been around a 10% increase in the number of older residents we look after in our care homes. The frustration we have is if the NHS was providing 10% more hip replacements, there would be people saying, well, that's fantastic. They wouldn't be saying you've overspent on your hip replacement budget. But that is kind of one of the challenges that we have to face, that we have a moral and a legal duty to provide these services, but clearly it comes at a cost. You note in 3.5, as has been the case for a number of years, there are a number of difficult protracted negotiations with the health board as to contribution on high complex cases. Like I said yesterday, it was an omission when the NHS was set up in 48 that social care really didn't exist then, and there's always a bit of an argument as to whether it's a health need or a social care need. But that is something we'll continue to kind of fight for our fair share of funding. But until that's resolved, it wouldn't be prudent to include that in our accounts at the moment. Table 1 on page 24 sets out some of the additional funding we've had in year from Welsh Government, which comes to a total of £2.908 million. You'll note that essentially it's around pay and pensions. When setting a budget, we have to make an estimate of what pay will be in the following year. It was higher than our estimates. I guess it's only right that we then receive that back into our settlement, although I would note that doesn't necessarily happen every year. 3.8, again, a positive move. Again, when we're calculating the impact of pay awards, it's actually quite difficult until you get the actual final detail because it's not uniform across the board depending on people's pay grades. But the positive news is that there was £466,000, which was surplus essentially when the actual figures were calculated properly. 3.9, again, our estimates over when we spend capital, that money the interest on that money is only payable when they're completed. Obviously, the timing of these impacts on our borrowing activity. In terms of our forecast, that's resulted in improvement in our borrowing costs of 346, which has a knock-on effect. In the next paragraph, we have to set money aside to meet these costs, and that's a positive of 167k. For those of you who are familiar with shared prosperity funding, Gwynedd is the council which kind of operates after the 6 councils in North Wales, so that the money kind of sits in their account. But obviously that earns interest, and we've received our share of £282,000 from that fund. Energy costs are dropping, so we think we will underspend by about £1 million on that phase. So again, that's positive. In 3.10, we received a one-off payment of 1.3 million from the North Wales Residual Waste Treatment Partnership. again, ideally, if we were being really prudent with the budget, one off income would go in our reserves, which we'll touch on later. But given the pressures in year, the decision to be made that would actually be set across the pressures that we're meeting in year. It's noted in 3.11, this is quarter three. There will still be sort of work to be done in quarter four in terms of further details, but obviously we're dealing with where we're at now. More concerning news, we know that with falling roles in schools, that there are going to be need reductions in teacher numbers. The cost of the redundancy processes falls upon this authority, so we do need to be very conscious of that. Last year that we were able to contain that within our central education budget, but that clearly remains an area of concern. 3.11.3, we have submitted a number of applications for shared prosperity funding. Again, they have to be improved in line with the grant scheme and that's signed off by Gwynedd Council. I don't have any concerns about that, but it's noted as if successful, we'll be receiving a further £500,000 of funding. 3.11.4, again, we have to estimate how much council tax we collect. Clearly that gets harder and harder for people as it goes up. We assume a collection rate of 98%. It appears we may have a small surplus, but it does also on the other side appear to be slowing down. So again, we'll have further detail on that as we get the quarter four report. So the net impact of all of that is that we have 1.275. Clearly, there's a lot of work to be done. As noted in 3.4, there's really robust spending controls around procurement, the spend control, and that's about real rigor and scrutiny to all we spend. But you know that is really challenging. I say demand is our biggest issue. If more people require care, then that is very difficult to balance. We can't withhold that essentially. Reserves position is there. Our percentage of net revenue is 4.36. We know that the recommended level is 5%. When I joined this council in 2017, I had the lowest reserves in Wales. It's incredibly difficult to improve that position, especially given the economic climate that we faced over the last 3 or 4 years. But we are very aware of that, and we're committed to doing everything we can to not reduce that position any further. So with that in mind, members, I'll take you back to page 23, and I will move to Cabinet Recommendations 2.2 to receive and note the latest final financial assessment of the estimated budgetary position for 24-25. So I'll open it up for any questions or observations, members. Councillor Emily, then Grumpy.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think, there's been such a huge amount of work that's gone on over the past few years to try and look at our budgetary position and everything that we've done in order to try and control spend as much as we can. We've had a peer review, we've had loads of work going on with SIPA, which continues to go on. And we really do look at different ways of working and how we can do that to reduce costs. But I think it's a timely reminder that whilst we're in the middle of budget setting, we are really focused on the numbers, and we are naturally needing to balance. But what we're seeing is overspends on demands, and that's people. And what we're doing is, we're providing good services for our residents, and they need more of that, which is why it's costing more. So I don't necessarily think that this is a bad thing, that we are doing that and protecting those most vulnerable people. That it is morally, it is the right thing to do, to be making sure that when people are ready to come out of hospital, that we bring them out of hospital. And it costs the taxpayer less for us to have them in social care than it does in health. Now, of course, there are issues about where the money comes from, and the money needs to follow the person. But that's a larger scale debate to have. But we are doing the right thing by our residents in order to do it. And I think it's really important that while we're talking about figures and we're talking about overspends, that we remind people that actually what we are talking about is not mismanagement of money and not being able to control that. It's the people, and I'm really proud that we're able to prioritise our residents in this way. And I think everyone here, we've all got our portfolios, and we'll be doing what we can to reduce overspend coming on budget. That's what we all aim to do. But some of it, the demand, it is outside our control. You know, in housing, I'm really proud that we don't have homeless people that are on the streets. We are doing things in different ways. We've transformed the housing service, and we'll continue to work through that, with lots of work going on, about how we deliver that. And yes, there is always more that we can do. But in housing, we've gone from a situation where we were really struggling, and we were having COVID and developments, and it's been a real struggle with trying to get those numbers up, and our projections just look fantastic over the next 3 years, and it's taken a while, and it's been really hard work. But what's to come in the pipeline, we should be as a collective really proud of how we've got there, and our RSL partners have stepped up, and we've really engaged, and we are working with people in a different way, in a better way, in a more strategic way, to share the challenges, and so that we are all doing our bit in order to protect the people that we're serving. And sometimes I just feel that we can get wrapped up in the numbers, and we can get so focused on being able to balance the budget. We sometimes lose sight of what we're doing, why the budgets have maybe not come in on budget, or they've overspent, and we take our eye off what we're doing, and why we should be really proud of all the services that we deliver, because I think we are a fab council that delivers really good services to our residents, and that's been recognised both in the peer review and in SIPA. So I'm very happy to second your proposal, but I just think we all just need to take a breath and recognise that yes, there is an overspend that we wouldn't, ideal world could have done without, but why we've got the overspend is for the right reason, and it's because we're putting our residents first.
Right, Emily, you're absolutely right. I mean, I've often made the case that pretty much everything we do supports people's health and well-being, and therefore indirectly supports the NHS. But obviously there's a 50-day challenge by Wales Government to free up hospital beds, because we know that the acute situation in all our hospitals, I'm sure we've all got personal tales to tell about the issues. That work is vitally important, but in terms of costs, a hospital bed is anywhere from £350 a night up to £2,500, depending on the complexity of care. So yes, there is a burden to our taxpayers, our ratepayers, in terms of that additional expenditure, but the impact that makes the NHS and the savings overall are absolutely huge. So yeah, thank you for raising that. I've got Councillor Grumway.
I'd just like to endorse what Emily's just said, that despite all the challenges that we face over the last few years, especially coming out of COVID, where there's an awful lot of additional demand on our services, we still struggle to maintain service the best we can. And it's easy to get caught up in the downside of all these pressures that we have. But I just look at what we've achieved in the coastal protection over the last few years. Over £73 million of coastal protection work has gone on, and including some inland sea protection work for flooding as well. So there's an awful lot of good work going on in the authority, despite these challenges that we have as far as budgetary pressure. So I'd like to endorse the report, and I know that Emily's already seconded it, but I would have done as well. Thank you.
Okay, job, Grumway. Members, any other comments or observations? I've got Penny and then Nigel, sorry. Penny.
Thank you, Leader. So as portfolio holder for adults and community, I'm extremely overwhelmed by the volume of work we as elected members, that all elected members, expect not only of our officers to do, but to excel in their everyday achievements. This goes for all individuals who give an excellent service to people in all our wards and communities. These statutory services meet the demand that presents itself on a daily basis, but this demand comes at a significant cost. The significant cost that we as elected members surely must be aware of by now. The terms transparency, drilling down, let's fight this out at full council. I'm not into these sort of phrases, and I don't think it helps our most vulnerable in the community. As a ward councillor, I want my residents to have the best service. As a town councillor, I want my residents to have the best service. As portfolio holder, I want all elected members to have the same expectations, which they most certainly have. I've yet to be made aware of situations where this expectation has not been met. The reports we have regularly, annually, inspectors, we've had SITFA, Audit Wales highlight the excellent transformation projects that are taking place and have taken place and already are a huge success in the locations where they are. When council set a balanced budget, that ensures all these service requests can be met. This budget is on the hard work of all the officers, all the managers that have put in literally hours to make sure this service can carry on. So I'd like to say that those councillors who choose not to vote for a balanced budget are essentially not willing to ensure vulnerable residents are kept safe and we are able to meet their needs. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Benny. Councillor Nigel.
Yeah, diolch. Yeah, I'd like to reiterate what my colleagues have been saying. I think I can see from this report that our officers are working really hard to make sure that every penny we spend is spent correctly, bringing small savings at a time, but each one will add up. Our council tax and revenue and benefits team are working hard on the collection of council tax, making sure that people's council tax is correctly proportioned to the accommodation, and that those people who are on benefits are getting the correct benefits that they need. So you can see the whole team working together here for the benefit of the people of Conway. I think as Councillor Emily said, is, you know, we're very hard on ourselves, but at the end of the day, these are challenging times, and we should be very, very proud of what we're doing for the people of Conway and the good work that our officers are doing on our behalf. So yeah, I would just like to say that I fully support this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nigel. Kathy.
Thank you. So yes, I agree with everything that has been said, particularly Councillor Penny, who is next to me, and also we have adjacent portfolios. And just going back to what you said, Leader, at the very beginning of the meeting, you know, we can control our spend, which we are doing, and I have been so impressed at how the teams and officers have done that, but we can't control the numbers. So what are we doing about that? We have got coming up to HOSC an overview from Tim Pritchard, who is going to talk about the transformation programme within social care. That is a very wide programme that is looking at innovative ways to manage the issues around recruitment, about developing our own people, rebalancing the market. A lot of conversations come up about complex care packages. How are we providing very scarce but very specialist provision where that's needed? And of course, it comes at a cost if we don't have control of that ourselves. So we have to go to specialist providers who in some ways can charge whatever the market will bear. So we need to do work to rebalance that while remaining compassionate and human in our responses. So I believe that we are doing that really well. We had a foster care inspection. One of the areas that they looked at was our leadership and management of our foster caring service. That came out really, really highly. There were other areas that were looked at. I'm particularly proud on behalf of the officers that leadership and management came up so high, because the culture of a department obviously flows from the top. So we've got the right leadership in place. I've been amazed, impressed, and privileged to work with those teams over the short time I have been cabinet member for this portfolio. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So if there's no other comments or observations, members, we've had a proposer and a seconder. Can we vote if we're in favour of accepting recommendation? Okay, thank you all. So we'll move on to 6.3, which is the turn over the page. 6.3 is the draft revenue budget and council tax increase for 25-26. I think it's often been said that the most important thing that we do as members is set a budget for our officers to carry out. and provide the services that our residents need and require. And I think it's never more important than in these difficult times, as we kind of discussed with the previous two reports. This was presented to scrutiny yesterday. We had a 3-hour meeting. Members quite rightly raised concerns about the level of council tax, on the back of the two big increases we've had the last 2 years, the impact on our residents, the provision of services, the detrimental effect of further cuts. We all know this is a really difficult and complex situation. Again, I want to record my thanks to Amanda for the incredible amount of detail we're given, that we can make factual, but nonetheless difficult decisions. So I will go through the report. Obviously, it was covered at length yesterday, but clearly I want to kind of talk about, highlight the areas that we feel that we need to emphasize. So if we go to page 39, the introduction sets the scene there about our budget. And we've also, we've previously discussed in terms of the revenue, how much guesswork, educated guesswork goes into setting these budgets, how many things are out of our control around pay, essentially. So it's not a budget in the traditional sense that someone in a household would understand. We have a legal duty to estimate what the level of service demand will be in the following year. And we have to set in a budget that is balanced. And that means that there's sufficient money in there to meet those requirements. And that is a legal requirement for us. And that has to be signed off by our Section 151 Officer Amanda. The reality these days with the increasing demand is it actually gives us very little choice and very little room for manoeuvre, but we'll explore that as we go through. So every year we receive a settlement figure from Welsh Government. The provisional figure was on the 11th of December. Again, it's a bit of a bugbear of us all that we don't receive multi-year settlements. We have this process. We work all year on a figure, and then the figure arrives and we have to run around over a couple of months trying to figure out how we can utilize that. The final settlement won't be announced until the 25th of February. Usually most years there aren't huge differences. So in December, we revised we would receive an uplift of 3.6, which was 14th in terms of all the other authorities, but below the average of 4.3. That is a significant improvement from Conwy. You'll be aware we were joint bottom with Gwynedd last year. The reason why that's improved is changes to the funding formula, mostly around housing and the spend and demand and need for that. So whilst that is pleasing, clearly, I think there's still much work to be done in the funding formula, which we will discuss a little bit later. Not every year is there a floor in the settlement. I think this year the formula produced a real range from sort of 2.3 up to 5.6%. So there's a real range there, and the WLJ has been calling for a floor to recognise the difficulties this caused the authorities at the bottom of the pile. I could make the case that there wasn't one last year, but that would be churlish of me, I guess. But there you go. So we have been told we expect that settlement that it will increase to 3.8, and clearly with the difficult balancing act, it would be perhaps more prudent to wait until that was actually announced. But I think we can safely say that will come through. So we have factored that in to this budget. So Welsh Government supplies us with it's around 70% of our aggregate external finance. That's made of two elements. It's a revenue support grant and reallocation of domestic rates to us. Paragraph 2 sets out the background. We know for everybody out there that the really difficult economic conditions, inflation remains a real concern. And as we've discussed at length, our biggest issue is increasing demand for our services. In terms of the democratic trail, you would think if you listen to the main council meeting with budget that this was all new to members. We have a really, really rigorous budget setting process. It works all through the year. 3.3 sets out the numbers, formal reports that go to our scrutiny groups. As I mentioned yesterday, we have 4 scrutiny groups. We have an independently chaired layperson in audit governance, and we are scrutinised externally by multiple organisations, and budget and financial resilience is at the core of everything that we do. So we'll move on to, sorry, just to add that again, every member, we have twice a year, we have service reviews where members can ask questions, and given our financial, the budget is always on there about spend, overspend, are we doing too much, are we not doing enough? So I think members have that opportunity, and I think we as a council are incredibly well informed, but also incredibly transparent in the way we take those difficult decisions. So we'll move on to part 4. Our provisional settlement is now 218.58 million. Because there was some in-year movement, that's better than a bare 3.6 would be. Now, to be clear, that's still going to be challenging, but under the previous government's plans, we were expecting a 0% increase or potentially even a cut, which quite frankly would have been catastrophic for this council. So I am incredibly grateful for the settlement that we've got. If we move on to table 1, page 41, that kind of works through how that pans out essentially. So there is good news, but there's also some elements that are not as good as it first might appear. So if we look at coastal risk management, so we've talked about the work we do with our coastal defences, 85% of that is funded by Welsh Government, but they fund the interest on the loan. So we have got 1.3 million here, but in effect, that's already allocated to pay for those funding defence works. There's another figure there for housing grants. That was previously money that we had as a grant, which again, I think we'd all prefer it to be in the settlement because grant funding brings its own complications, but in a way that's already money that's been allocated as well. As usual, we have the pressures around teachers' pay, teachers' pension, our own staff's pay and pensions, which are set at a national limit, but clearly we legally have to pay those. So in terms of the overall increase, in terms of additional funding to meet our pressures, you'll note that's around about 8.174 million. We have actually lost a bit more money in terms of funding on data-based. There are, of the 22 local authorities in Wales, 19 have relative depopulation. We're seeing increases in the population, Swansea, Newport, and Cardiff, and relative depopulation in the other areas, which again, moving forward, is a really worrying trend for not just for Conwy, but all those other areas outside those cities that are growing. I'll take it down to 4.5. So the formula uses a wide range of data. There's a number of funding lines in there. It's theoretically meant to come up with an answer which meets the need of each local authority. It hasn't really been looked at properly in over 20 years. And as I've said, a lot of the data is out of date. I've secured a commitment with the WLJ that data will be updated. But for me, that's not moving quickly enough. But I think there's a more fundamental question about does it recognise the level of need now, the deprivation from a Conwy perspective, especially the costs of caring for an ageing population, with Conwy having the second highest population over 65s. It's just over 27%, which is roughly a third higher than the Welsh average. But a formula is a formula. You're looking 4.5. The answer it generates is that Conwy receives 1,911 pounds per capita. Our nearest neighbours in Denbighshire receive 304 pounds a head more. In Gwynedd, it's 160 pounds per head. Adjusted for our tax base, that actually equates with Denbighshire around 30 million pounds a year. You know, I've been a councillor since 2017. You're heading towards, if we're funded that level, we're heading about £250 million. They're huge sums of money, really significant sums of money. And you will know I challenge this whenever I can. I challenge it on a factual basis. The work we've done with CIFRA identified that they are a very close neighbour of ours in terms of their spend. And if you look at Data Wales and all the tick every single box, they're at sort of 96.7% match with us. So it's incredibly difficult to see why it costs 60% more per head to deliver service in Denbighshire than it does in Conwy. But you know, that's a fight for another day, I guess. But frustrating nonetheless. If we'll move on to Appendix 1, Table 2 on page 42. That sets out our resource shortfall. Again, there's lots of elements there around pay and pressures. If we look back to last year, our pay pressures and pensions was 14 million. Our entire increase we got of funding was 4.6, which does highlight some of the challenges we faced last year. Nonetheless, those pay figures are there. There's various bits of levies, funding for our schools essentially. But if we look down at the bottom there where we've got unavoidable service pressures, so our children looked after, £2.879 million, vulnerable people, £1.746 million, residential nursing and domiciliary care fees, £4.780 million. And as we've seen recently, an increase in numbers in our residential nursing home, which again carries on the next year. It's another £2 million. School transport remains a concern. We know inflation has dropped, a long way from where it was a couple of years ago. However, it's not even across all sectors. There are particular sectors around transport where that inflation figure still remains stubbornly high. And you'll then see with vehicle maintenance costs that there is pressure there, partly because we've had to scale back an investment in some of our vehicles, and partly because the cost in that sector, we're getting mechanics and stuff, has driven up costs. Again, you'll be aware we are planning to invest money back into our fleet, which will hopefully mitigate against that. So as we move down there, you will note at the last report, our remaining shortfall, there's some pluses and some minuses. It was £9.936 million in the last quarter because of the additional demand for our services in terms of residential homes. That now comes up to 10.6. So it's around an additional 600k of pressures balancing in the floor, et cetera. And again, that change is kind of laid out for us in table 3. We have to make a lot of assumptions in the budget around pay and pay settlement. Obviously, those are educated assumptions, but because we physically don't set them ourselves, then clearly that is an area of risk. But we know Amanda is always very prudent, and hopefully they will be in the range that we can expect them. But if they're not, that's a serious concern because that falls on our budget again. So we go to addressing the resource shortfall. Amanda's put it very politely in simple terms. There's 2 ways to address the resource shortfall: reduce the forecast expenditure, increase the forecast resources. Put more simply, that's more cuts or more council tax. That is a really difficult decision we have to balance. We know council tax impacts on the poorest the most, but we also know that cuts to service impact on the poorest the most, and that is the really difficult dichotomy that we have to wrestle with. 6.2 talks about reserves. I've already referred to the fact that these are low. Conwy was always a council with a very, very low council tax, and I understand how popular that is. I understand how people are upset when we increase council tax by nearly 10% year on year. That's incredibly difficult. The reality is, if we had the higher rate earlier, we would be in a position where we could build up more reserves. If we were funded more fairly with the formula, again, that's not to criticise other councils because they have the same issue that we have of a low per capita funding. If you look at our other local authorities in North Wales this year, that they're around about the same situation as we are. We have been higher over the 3 years, but if you look at those figures, that they have used their reserves to able to shore those budgets up. But reserves can only be used once, so in many cases, they're actually storing up difficulties ahead. But clearly, I would rather be in the situation of some councils who've got £200 million of reserves than in the situation we're in, because clearly that would make life a lot simpler and a lot easier and a lot less worrying. We move on to business cases. So this shortfall includes the revised business case 1.424 million. Now, to be clear, there is a huge amount of work goes on to make sure these are absolutely essential. Usually they're about avoidance of other costs if we don't fulfill legal duties. Obviously, that has a consequence for us both in terms of letting those individuals down, but also financial consequences. So what we're proposing with this budget is all these essential business cases are funded, which equates to 1.424 million. We move on to budget reductions. So over the last 12 years of austerity, councils absorbed £92.559 million of pressure. As I stated yesterday, it's incredibly frustrating. When we explain this to people, there's just a little bit of a shrug. If that kind of money had been reduced from the NHS, there would be all hell to pay, I would suggest. But for whatever reason, there's not the same kind of sympathy with councils. We know people are paying more tax than they've ever done, but it's absolutely clear from the numbers that less and less has come back to local government. For everybody says, where's the money go? Well, it's there in the figures. So cut does become increasingly difficult to make cuts. We've all seen when we are looking at cut stuff, people get really upset. They're paying more and they perceive that they're getting less. They are, that perception depends on what services you use at the end of the day. But if you rely on that public toilet and we close it, it's very, very difficult for people. And I can understand why they would be upset. So over the course of this year, our officers look at areas where we could potentially save money, make cuts. They identified potential savings of £2.923 million. We had 2 budget working groups, again reflects the level of engagement we have and scrutiny with all our members. Of those, members were content or thought 2.5 million were palatable. There was just short of 500,000 that they felt wasn't palatable. And to be clear, some of those are things we discussed before. Reduction of libraries to 1 day a week. Again, not something any of us would want to do, but I'm pleased to say in this budget that it's not something we'll have to move forward in this current year. And again, I'll move on to later to what the budgets look in the years coming forward. So that will not be taken forward. There are other issues around about reducing CCTV. We know antisocial behaviour is very topical at the moment. We've invested an awful lot of money in CCTV. We have a gold standard centre in Cowpeth, which your members will have seen. That's something we are very, very proud of. We don't want to be in a situation where we're cutting that because, again, these things can have further costs down the line. There was discussion around reducing some of our gritting routes. Again, that would be dangerous. We know members, we had debates during the years about members wanting us to extend our gritting routes. So I think that was a sensible position to come, where we make savings where we can, but we got to recognise that some of them are basically bad decisions and cost more money in the long run. But so this budget accepted that there would be £2.517 million of reduction. Some of that will be increased fees and funding as well. But again, the details are in the Appendix 6. We held a special meeting since the last budget report to give detailed consideration to individual schools. Really proud that 48 of our members are school governors. I've been a school governor in 2 since 2017. And that is very challenging when you've had to deliver the budgets we've had over the last couple of years, but absolutely vital that we understand the situation our schools are in. I think it's fair to say we've just under 60 schools. Some are in a better position than others, but there's a whole range of factors to that in terms of size of the roles, where they are, the funding allocated. It is a very, very complex system, but I think members did sympathise with schools. We have always done our best to support schools. Last year, as I say, we received 2.3 million from Welsh Government. We actually increased school spending by we received 2.3% increase in our settlement. We actually increased school budgets by 4.9%. But that wasn't enough to meet their pay pressures, etc., etc. So on the back of that meeting and discussions with members, we feel it would be incredibly difficult to ask schools to make further cuts. So this budget proposal is service reductions across the rest of the councils of 2.517 million, but a nil reduction to our schools budgets. There will still be reductions based on pupil numbers. That remains a real challenge where we have falling roles, but clearly we don't want to add that by actually putting a further cut on them. We move on to reserves and balances. We've also sort of gone through the figures of that, as we have agreed time and time again. Use of reserves, given the level of reserves, is not where we want to be. You'll be familiar with the Audit Wales report on the financial stability of all councils that was recently published. Of the local authorities replied, there were only 2 who actually didn't decrease the reserves last year. And again, Conwy was one of those, which I think is laudable given the difficult situation that we face. We would like to be in a situation where we grow the reserves. That is the advice of our Section 151 officer. But we also have to be realistic of the situation that we're in. And again, it's all about finding that kind of middle position, that balanced position. So in 6.2, the proposals for the budget allow for no planned use of reserves and balances, but there's no permanent budget set aside to build reserves. There will be opportunity to move forward with capital receipts and stuff to prioritise that, but we are not building that in to the budget because realistic at this stage, that would be an additional burden on council tax essentially at this stage. So when we look at the number we're left with to actually balance the budget, it's important to note that we collect on behalf of the North Wales Fire and Rescue Authority. The amount they're asking for an increase this year equates to 0.68 in council tax. Again, worth noting over the last couple of years, the level of increase from North Wales Fires has been around the 10%, similar to ourselves. Again, we get a lot of criticism for not being able to balance our budget. But I think that clearly reflects that all public sector organisations are facing the same challenges around demand, pressure, inflation and wages. 6.24 is very interesting. So members are aware that Welsh Government have modelled an increase of 10.26 in council tax. So what that means is when they're estimating need, like we are, about what we need to put aside for next year in order to run our services to the level required, the funding they gave us leaves a gap which would require 10.26% council tax to settle. So we are acutely aware that we've been just below 10% for the last 2 years, and we really need to do everything we can to bring that down further. And I guess we'd all be a lot more happy if it was much lower again, but I think every penny counts, doesn't it, at the end of the day. So you note in 6.25, a 1% increase in council tax raises £795,000 net of council tax reduction scheme. If we just met that gap using council tax alone, it would be pretty much where Welsh Government thought we'd be at 10.17. But we're confident that we are going to receive around 0.6 million of a one-off grant income. What we're proposing is that that goes against council tax. It's used to lower the amount that people are paying. I know it's not a huge difference, but I think it's really important, and that there is a risk to that. We know next year that grant income mightn't come to us, therefore that becomes a sort of drain on our reserves. But again, it comes back to a balance, doesn't it, about what's as fair as we can possibly be to everybody. So the effect in that will be on a Band D, which is over 62% of properties in Conway, it'll increase by £2.91 a week, which is £151.15 a year for our services, and an increase of £11.79 a year for North Wales Fire and Rescue Service. Figures are set down there that they're obviously a single person discount. There are around 21,400 households out of the 55,800 who receive single person discount, and around the 10,000 mark in terms of people who receive council tax reduction scheme. And I would note that it's around 8,000 of those households receive 100% reduction of council tax. It's really important to remember that for our most vulnerable, this raise won't affect them, because essentially they do not pay council tax. Okay, so the summary of the budget proposals is a council tax increase of 8.72 to fund council services, and an increase of 0.68 to fund the North Wales Fire Service levy, and a combined council tax figure of 9.4. The one-off income is noted, and that risk is noted as well. So the overall summary is set in table 5, sets out the budget reductions and the kind of paragraphs where we actually refer to the various bits that I've just discussed there. So we'll move on to a budget consultation. Really want to thank everyone who took part in that survey. Over 1,048 responses. I think what was really encouraging was, of the people who did reserve, the vast majority actually read the budget, because it's really difficult to get this information, figures, over to people. It remains a real challenge. So the details are in Appendix 8. Consultation shows the top 5 services that are most important to people and their communities are education, schools, youth services, emptying bins, recycling, waste disposal, roads and infrastructure, supporting vulnerable people and adults, and older people, swimming pools, leisure centres and outdoor leisure. I think education was clearly the highest, but it was really interesting to note we drilled down in the detail of what people thought was important. Even the least important, in inverted commas, I think, was parks and open spaces, but actually 74% thought it was important, or very important. I know you can make statistics do anything, but I think for me that highlights that every service, we often say this, every service you do is important to somebody, and it's very difficult to prioritise those. And it's very clear if you look across the last 20 years of local authorities where the money's going. It's going to increase costs and complexity in social care and education. It now makes up 80% of our service budget. The efficiencies we've had to find have been on roads and parks and stuff like that. But I still think Conway, people often get quite insular. I think if you go in any other local authorities, I think we do really, really well with our parks and open spaces. This budget again protects a lot of that. We brought back the additional weed spraying. I don't think we realised the impact that would have. So yeah, that we'll bring that back in. Some of the other proposals for cuts, we're getting rid of our horticultural service, which again, disastrous for tourism, but would cost us more in the long run if we tried to open that back up again. So there are some positives in there. I guess when we look at table 6, that illustrates where we intend to spend the money and essentially what people are getting for their money. So service area schools, the net increase to schools will be just shy of £6 million. Additional 1.8 to our education services, which provide vital support to our schools, especially with the reform of Eston, which will be coming through. You see social services, these are most vulnerable children, adults, or elder citizens who work really hard all their life. We're increasing that by £14 million. They are the most vulnerable and they rely on this council to look after them in their time of need. So, you know, that area of growth, I'm proud that we're putting that money in to look after them. Environmental, additional 1.65 million. There will also hopefully be some additional funding from Welsh Government in terms of being able to fix potholes. We know that that's an area we've underspent in over the years because the money has gone elsewhere. I think from memory, to bring all our roads up to the standard we would like costs about £59 million. Now, we don't have anything near that amount, but there will be better news, I think, moving down the road. And again, I do feel really sorry for our staff in environment, roads and facilities because whilst it is essential, it's not statutory and they have suffered, but that can be shown across all councils. So 7.4, the proposals outline the report seek to recognise what's important to residents. So we're going to ensure that school budgets are maintained at a standstill, net of the reduction in pupil numbers. We're going to increase the funding related to pupil numbers and complexity at Yscol Gogarth, again, our most vulnerable who need our support. We're going to address service pressures for support our most vulnerable residents. We're going to support and sustain the care sector, and we're going to fund essential business cases to address significant risk in social care, health and safety, and regulatory services. So we need, when forming a budget, obviously to think a bit further ahead. I've previously said that it would be really helpful for us and our schools to have sort of 3-yearly budget settlements, so we could kind of work on a 3-year period rather than the system we have at the moment. I know UK government are talking about a fiscal statement in the spring, which may bring that forward, but we shall see. The outlook is really concerning. We know at a national level, growth is sluggish and it's really difficult to turn around 14 years of austerity. But there's a medium-term financial plan attached. There are clearly a lot of knowledge gaps within that, which are recognised, and it's really hard to have a sort of really clear financial plan if the key information you need you don't have. Pay remains a significant concern for us. Apologies. Yeah, if you look in table 7, it sets out the size of the challenge ahead. But to be very clear, and was clear from the work the Welsh Audit done, this is affecting all local authorities, not just in Wales, across the UK, that these are not mismanagement of funds. These are not things we're doing wrong. It's just the challenges that we face from increasing costs and increasing demand, and I guess the legacy of 14 years of underfunding. Table 8 sets out some of the risks in terms of our budget settling. You can see the vast majority of them are out of our hands to a great extent in terms of pay awards, various bits there. And there's Mother Nature down the bottom. We know we've had a number of named storms this year, which our excess is just short of £600,000, which doesn't sound the best insurance policy in the world, but that's where we're at. So this budget essentially is based on reasonable and prudent estimates. It is a really difficult thing to square. As I say, we know council tax is really hard for people, but we also know they rely on our services, and there does become a limit where it's really not worth paying your council tax if the services aren't there to look after people in their need. Just the last thing, we move on to local government, page 52. Members here will be acutely aware of their legal responsibilities to set a balanced budget. If we don't, Section 114 is issued. There's been a number of those across England. Most of them have been where there's been a specific issue that the council has made a bad investment or has fallen foul of legislation. That's not the case with this authority. I'm not saying we get everything right, but there are increasingly numbers of councils who are heading towards that. But I think we all know, anyone who follows this, that that does not protect residents from council tax rises. There've been some record rises in Birmingham, and there have been savage cuts there at libraries, people turfed out of homeless accommodation. So we, again, have a moral and legal duty, I think, as local representatives to take responsibility for what we were elected to do. Making the popular decision is not always the right decision, but yeah, you know, that's what we'll look to do. So just in terms of next steps, if Cabinet support this budget today, then we'll make a recommendation to full council next week. And it's absolutely right that given the importance of this decision, that it is a full council decision where every member will get the same vote as I and you do. So I'll open it up for questions at this stage before I look to move the recommendations, members. So thanks for your patience there.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for the thorough presentation. As you say, it's difficult, isn't it? You know, we all appreciate how hard it is out there in terms of cost of living. Another increase in council tax is not something that people are going to welcome, but we have been elected, as you say, to make the tough choices because we know that that money needs to be available to spend on what's typically some of our most vulnerable residents. I just wanted to say, you know, I'm really proud of the fact that we've as a cabinet worked hard to find a way of balancing this budget, but also taking into consideration, certainly in terms of my portfolio, as you have said, Leader, the demands in schools. You know, and I think sometimes it's hard for people out there to appreciate just how much work goes into the local authority. You know, just into one school I've been visiting, and obviously I've visited schools with you as well, Leader, this last year, and over the last few weeks I've visited many schools, and they work so incredibly hard. Schools aren't like they were when I was a pupil in school. You know, they are everything to some families, and certainly to some children. You know, they are there to address the additional learning needs. They're there often for social, emotional issues, to support families in a much more well-rounded way. They're kind of the first port of call, the sort of social services, almost health. They pick up all the mantles. And I really have to say a massive word of thanks to every member of staff we have, from head teacher, teaching assistants, admin and support staff in the schools. They do an absolutely amazing job. And as you say, whilst we are putting forward a standstill budget for schools, there are still significant demands there, and schools are addressing that. You know, they're looking at ways of reducing staff and looking at the layout of their schools and perhaps class sizes and things. But yeah, I just think we can't underestimate just how hard they work. I've been in a number of meetings the last few days where we've looked at safeguarding. I was in a head teacher conference where we looked at responding to, you know, God forbid there be an issue, a significant issue in schools, and for them to be prepared if that day ever came, which hopefully it never would. But it's a real eye-opener to see that and to realise that pressure daily of knowing that you're safeguarding those children. We've got nearly 16,000 children attend our schools, and young people attend our schools every day. So I guess it's just to say to people out there, you know, please bear with us. We're not putting council tax up because we see that as an easy option. We're doing it because we really understand the impact that additional funding can have to help to support. You know, obviously from my perspective, that's predominantly looking at children who access our schools. Our youth service doing a fantastic job at addressing what we are aware in some areas you can have hotspot ASB, and just in general to help them in terms of life skills. They're doing wonderful, amazing work. So we have to continue to support that. And I'm sure that other members will talk about their areas moving forward. But as a council, it's incredible the amount of work that goes on. As you said, you know, something is important to everybody. You know, different parts of the council will impact on their lives more so. But it's incredible the amount of work, the members of staff that go over and above day in, day out to support people, whether that's
the refuse collector going into the person's garden to pick up their bin because they're unable to do it for themselves, or whether it's the TA who's working with a child who's having a particularly difficult day. You know, it's just amazing what we do as a council, and that's why we have to make the difficult decisions to address that need and support it. And I'm happy to support that today, on the understanding that this is the way that we do it. We do need to be funded better. You said yesterday we're underfunded, and you know, you touched on it then. So many years of austerity have had an impact. You know, and I'm obviously not party political, but government is going to have to recognise that we can't continue to make significant cuts. There is a point where they're going to have to invest. They're going to have to find a way to invest. But you know, until that day comes, and I appreciate we've obviously had more than we were expecting this year, which has made the situation a little easier. But until that day, we will continue to make tough decisions and do what we think in terms of balance of what works best for our communities and for often some of the most vulnerable members of that community. So I'm happy to second the recommendation, Leader. Thank you.
I haven't actually proposed an introduce because there's a slight difference between what's recommended to cabinet and what we're going through. But if members are happy, so I'll do it now just so we can carry on. Recommendation to cabinet was a balanced budget be recommended. So with that was the ask for scrutiny. What I'm asking for support with here is our recommendation is 2.2 to approve the budget proposals set in table 5 of Appendix 1. Which basically sets out all the areas that I've just covered, but essentially it's 8.72 plus 6.85 plus the sort of cuts and stuff that we had proposed. That's okay. So I will move that now, and if you okay to second that. I've got it. Emily first, and then Dilwyn, Gromley, and Kathy, the night.
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, and thanks for going through all of that. And we had a really fruitful discussion yesterday at scrutiny as well, didn't we? About this. I just think, you know, it's a really sad time that we're in, that we're still having to make these really significant cuts to services and increase council tax. You know, it's certainly not what any of us got involved in local government to do. But we are where we are. You know, I just want to echo what Julie said about staff right across the council, because they've been amazing. I mean, you know, it wouldn't exist without them. They're our absolute biggest asset. They've done fantastic with coming up with more innovative ways that we can do things. And you know, I'm really proud of the work that they're doing on our behalf for the residents of Conway. I think that it's important to highlight as well that the proposal that we are proposing is an extra £13.58 a month. We often get caught up in percentage rise figures, but I just want to highlight the actual monetary value in that for a Band D property, in order to protect the services that we are doing, as well as the most vulnerable residents. You know, I've had this conversation about schools and education over the past few years, but particularly over the past few weeks. And I've had quite a few, but I don't have kids, why am I paying for schools comments, which I just perplex me slightly, because people might not have children, but they still will need a doctor or a nurse or get someone to care for them, or a physio or a therapist or a gym instructor, or a lawyer, and all those people need educating. So you will need educated people in the future, and so we need to just be really mindful of what our services are telling us and where they're struggling. You know, we were it was very clear a couple of years ago when the care sector approached to say how much they were struggling with the care homes in order to provide care for our elderly residents, and that really hit home, because you know they are our elderly residents, and they need to stay in their communities where their family network are, and we reacted, and I'm really proud of us for doing that as a council, to do that, and we've got to do the same this time with schools, notwithstanding the difficulty that causes for us, because we do try and prioritise all of those areas that we're really struggling with. I also just want to say that you know, I think we've done as a cabinet, particularly yourself, leader, you've done a fantastic job of the lobbying exercise this year with ministers. They definitely know of our situation in Conway. People are very aware of it. We've sent lots of letters and had lots of correspondence and lots of conversations. All cabinet members have had conversations over this period. So everyone is really aware of the situation in Conway. I don't think it's any surprise at all. And I think we in Wales are very lucky that we have that direct access and contact to ministers, whereas we wouldn't have that over the border. So I think that's been a really worthwhile exercise as well. That extra 15 million that we're talking about, it's really saved us. And I know it's not enough, and I know we need more, and I'm the first one to say it. But I must say I was quite astounded yesterday that that was the line that some opposition members were taking already about national insurance. We were expecting a flat settlement, so that's nothing. We were expecting zero. We got given 15 million, and it will cost us 2.5 million in national insurance. So if I had the option of zero or 15 million minus the 2.5 million of national insurance, I know which one I'd be choosing. So just to put that into context, if we took the national insurance of 2.5 million away from 15 million and we took the housing grant for fairness, because that was a grant and it's now been included in the settlement, if we took that out and if we looked at what the council tax would have to be if we didn't get anything from last year, the council tax would be over 20%. So, you know, but we have had a change in government in July. We're now in February. We don't have 20% on the table. I think the government has recognised the serious pressures that local government and indeed the public sector are under, and they have shown in their one budget that they've had since they were in post that they are prioritising those public services, and I'm really proud of that. And there is lots more to do, and there's lots way to go. But let's not forget that we are still in this mess after over 14 years of austerity. We had Liz Truss that crashed the economy, that we are still paying for now with high interest rates, with house building that stopped. So the reason that we're looking at the figures and when we're saying we're going through housing and saying there is a dip, it's because the builders weren't able to carry on because of decisions that were made. So the fact that the opposition is pulling this 3.4% rise in council tax because of national insurance is just absolutely flabbergasting, considering where we were without this additional 15 million from Welsh Government. So I'm really pleased that we are in a position that we are, that we're able to balance the budget, and the way that Cabinet have worked this year, really lobbying hard. You've done really well, Leader, to get that change in the funding formula, because that is by no means an easy feat. It's really hard to get substantial changes like that, and it has seen us in a much better place on that table than we would have been. You know, and I think we, you know, there is still work to do. We've got lots to do before next year, but I'm really pleased with the red lines that we've put in place. And you know, we are in a position where we've got to do what we've got to do to make sure that this council continues to be able to deliver services for our most vulnerable residents. So I'm not thrilled to be supporting a budget that's still putting council tax up, but I'm confident that what we've done and what we're proposing is the right thing to do.
Thank you, Emily. Just your support has been absolutely invaluable to me in helping me the lobbying and speaking to ministers and things like that. So I want to thank you. I've got a few members who want to speak. I just think it'd be quite useful for the Chief Exec just to maybe expound a little bit on the process we brought in to try and reduce that spend, because clearly, you know, we rely on officers doing that. So I just think it'd be useful for members to hear that before we carry on. So, Free.
Yeah, thank you, Diolch, Leader. Yeah, I was reflecting after Frost yesterday. I think I mentioned the time frame of 4 months, but actually, we've been working on this budget for 13 months. And first of all, I have to thank Amanda. I know she was thanked by you, but I personally like to thank Amanda and Gareth and the whole team in finance around the work. The amount of time that's put into these reports. They are exceptional reports. And I know the Leader mentioned it yesterday, but I also trawl different reports across different authorities, and the level of information is is spot on as far as I can see. It's not always easy to read because the narrative is around the position we're in, but it's very clear, and I think we can all agree on that. So I guess just in terms of I did put together some thoughts around this a few weeks ago around how we've reached here, and I think we shouldn't lose track of where we were really 2 years ago when we were setting that initial budget, which was incredibly difficult when inflation was at its height, and you know the various gaps we've had over the years. I think 35 million, 25 million, 30 million. It's beyond the pale, really, isn't it? It's we've never seen anything like it, and as officers, I think I'm right to say that it has been the most challenging times any of us have ever seen. You bring COVID into the mix as well. It's been quite a journey for the past 6 years. So, but just in terms of context, so last year we engaged with SIPFA, but even before then we put things in trail. So one of the main things, and it came out in the consultation last year, was around our estate. So you know, you're all aware that Bodlondeb, we've been through a process there, and we're doing continuing that process of realigning our estate. Emily's already mentioned the housing board and the fantastic work's been done there, which you know is a journey we're still on, but that was a very transformational project that's been 2 years in the making. So that's been incredibly important to feed into this report. We undertook a peer review in 2023, which you know raised some issues. I think I'm quite right to say that things that we already knew. But we did instigate an action plan on the back of that. But that was we decided 12 months ago that actually we need a bit more bespoke work. So we engaged with SIPFA December 23, January 24, and they've been working with us since then. We set up vacancy controls in January 24, established a strategic budget group, which includes me, the strategic directors, heads of finance, and a representative of SIPFA to address the challenges on the budget setting, which has informed this budget, and plans are moving forward for savings and transformation that resulted from that. But it was trying to make sure that we were engaging earlier so that you were informed earlier. But I guess events change, don't they? Things change, but I think it worked well on that basis. We introduced spend controls on the back of SIPFA's recommendations, which came in October, which meant controls over everything over £1,000 plus spot checks under £1,000, which I think has given us reassurance around spend more than anything else, which is good, isn't it? Around that, SIPFA engaged in some specific work with social care and children's around commissioning, specific work on assets, specific work then around support staff sitting within the council. We installed the new finance system, which came into play, you know, fully last year. We've engaged on digital transformation. That work is ongoing. I think we discussed this at various meetings last month, but that will continue, and talks are ongoing, and we're still, I was last week discussing and in presentations around various different solutions that could help us moving forward. We will engage SIPFA further on work around various areas, which we will expand more in the next couple of months. And then that planning for 26-27 budget has already started, with the strategic budget group sessions already in place and the forward work plan being arranged for that. You know, we could go on and on, couldn't we? But you know, a couple of other things, I guess. Foster carers work, really important work has been done around foster carers, and we're hoping to see the fruits of that coming through in the next year or two. And investing capital also to bring the revenue costs down. We've seen the capital programme fleet element has been an issue for us, and that's been a priority. So that will hopefully mean revenue being reduced. So all this work has gone into fragments of this budget setting process. Things change, and the biggest thing is demand. That's something we can't control. And with the demand we're seeing in various services at the moment, I do feel that actually that underfunding of core strategic core statutory services is becoming a real issue for us all. we will do our best. We've already started lobbying within Welsh Government from an officer level, discussing with various officers, and I'm really grateful for that. I think what we forget is when we raise this with colleagues in England, they laugh our ability to engage directly with Welsh Government through their officials, and I think that's incredibly reassuring for us that we can access that, and we'll continue to do that. So I thought that context was useful, I think, in terms of it's not just a quarter of the year that's been spent to this. It is becoming a 12-month-a-year thing, and it's taking a lot of time. All our heads of service, all our officers, and that will continue, but it's all for trying to find a way through this, and I'm really grateful for the support from all members, really, in this. Yeah.
Green, that's really useful. And I think what I'm proudest of this council is that cabinet stayed together, worked together, united with officers, and we do support each other, because that's the only way we're going to find a way through this in what is really, really difficult circumstances and difficult times. I've got Dilwyn and Gromwy, then Cathy, then Nigel. That wasn't quite the order. My apologies. Dilwyn.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'm also supportive of what we've heard. I want to pay thanks to you as leader and the officers, all the officers that have been working very hard to get us where we are today. I support what I've heard because I am absolutely of the opinion that this cabinet and the officers have turned every stone over and have looked under all of them. Whichever question is asked in future, I'm certain that that question will have been asked by members of this cabinet. I'm also, of course, a portfolio holder, and I'm very proud that we continue to provide services which give a great deal of pleasure and education to people in Conwy. Swimming pools are still open and going strong. The libraries, the leisure centres, and I think we have a great deal to be very happy and proud about with the work that's been done in those departments, so that our residents in this county have things to show for what they're paying. And theatres, of course. All of those, in my opinion, show that we are investing in keeping our residents healthy, and it's an investment in the future. If we lose things such as those, it's almost impossible then to get them back once you've lost them. And as I say, I'm absolutely certain that this cabinet has turned every stone over, and that we do provide a service of a high standard, not just of a standard, but of a high standard to our residents. So I'm absolutely supportive of what we've heard, and thank you for such a comprehensive report. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for the report. I seem to think we've been on this journey now as being quite right for the last 12 months, and for the last few months, this seems to be all we've been talking about, really. I see figures in my sleep nowadays of savings we have to try and find, and how we try and cope with that. Despite all this, I think ERF have borne the brunt of savings over the years, and most of the services that ERF provide are ones that affect all our residents in Conwy, whether it be street cleaning, potholes, bins, street lighting, and all those other things that our public value. So it's difficult to bring in these savings while trying to maintain the services the best we can. At the same time, we have to remember that our services are delivered by people. But it does have an effect on those staff, having to try and cope with increasing demand with less resources. And I am very well aware of the effect this has on staff morale, but they carry on. We've seen many storms this last winter where they've been out in all weathers, coping with the changes in our climate, and there's obviously a change in our climate. We've seen greater demand on the type of work that the ERF does to try and maintain and protect our residents during these difficult times. So I will support the budget, as difficult as it is, but we do have to deliver a balanced budget. At the end of the day, I believe that we have to play with the cards that we're dealt, and that's what Conway has always been good at. We knuckle down and we get on with the job, regardless of the pain. And I feel for our residents having to bear that brunt. But I'd also like to thank the town and community councils that have been very supportive in helping us maintain some of those services. They've put their shoulder to the wheel and come with us on this journey. So I'd like to thank them for their support. And I do endorse the budget.
Grant, and absolutely endorse what you said about the amazing work they do, and it is a service that hasn't been funded as well as others because for the reasons that we've outlined, but they always seem to find a way. You know, we've got the second highest recycling rate in Wales. A lot of that's down to the good work our residents do. We know wheelie bins can be a nuisance, especially when it's windy, and so there is work involved, but that would cost millions to this council if we weren't doing that. And nobody wants to see that going landfill. Think about our children's future and their grandchildren. So that is really down to them, and they delivered that in 2018 with absolutely minimal fuss, and we've seen that that's not as easy as it appeared to be. So I've got Councillor Cathy, then Nigel.
Thanks again, Leader, and thanks to everyone for this detailed report, to Amanda and team for leading on this work. This is my first time going through the budget process as a cabinet member. As such, I found the work really thorough and transparent, despite the changing landscape that we're navigating on an almost daily basis. So I just want to give a bit of a shout out to Jenny, Steph, Kat, Lowry and their teams who have worked really hard to produce the numbers that go behind this report, sometimes to really, really tight deadlines. They have all been flexible around their business cases as well, while holding the line, which is really important in relation to statutory duties and safety. So that balance is so important. The teams I now work so closely with across social care have extremely connected and complicated relationships with a wide variety of partners and providers across many multi-agency services. So looking at budgets and business cases has those extra layers of complexity. And managing those relationships isn't easy either, but I found that they do it with intelligence and grace, and I thank them for that. I have to agree with the points raised by Councillor Emily as well about the impact on all of us of an extended period of austerity. Unfortunately for me, my observation is that this has been followed by cuts to winter fuel allowances, a decision to keep the 2-child cap in place, and we can't ignore this wider political landscape when we're dealing with human beings as our residents. We have to pull together to mitigate those impacts. And I'd just like to say that under the leadership of Charlie and Emily, I'm satisfied that this cabinet has done just that. I couldn't agree more that I didn't come into local government to do this work and just focus on this. I want to help improve the lives of all our residents. As Reen says, we've all worked hard as a supportive collective to do our very best for all our residents under these really difficult and challenging circumstances.
Nigel, then Penny.
Diolch, Leader. Well, I agree with everything that's been said here today. I would like to add, you mentioned that we've listened to our residents and we've now recommissioning the weed spraying for the county. The open spaces ERF is something that I've always supported. It's key to our tourism, but it's also key to the mental well-being of our residents. Having a good, tidy, orderly street scene and park areas is so beneficial to our residents, and we really, really underestimate that. And I'm a staunch supporter of ERF because they do such good work that we just take for granted every day. With the budget, it is really, really hard times, and I can't pay enough admiration to yourself, Charlie, and Emily, for the work that you've done on behalf of us and the residents. The officers have worked diligently and hard to bring in as many savings as they can this is, for me, this has been 10 years of cuts and savings. Over those years, it's been difficult every year. And we're still asking more of our officers. And I've got so much admiration for the work that they do and the budget that Amanda's brought to us today. I did say yesterday at Finance and Resources, this is a budget that protects our residents, because those in the poorest households, those at the most needy within our society, we look after them. They get help, up to 100% relief on council tax. But it's the middle people, the working people, the families who are not high earners and they're not low earners, in the middle ground. And this budget, I feel, genuinely protects it. It keeps it down to as smaller amount as we can physically do without neglecting those statutory duties, which we've heard talk about, you know, our children and people with complex needs. And these are the costs that our residents don't see and don't know about. And they are astronomical and mind-boggling and really, really frightening for me as a cabinet member to see. But we do that. And I think we should be very, very proud. As a county, we punch well above our weight. We provide an excellent county for our residents compared to our neighbouring authorities. I feel I sit right on the border with Denbighshire. And I just wish that we were as well supported through the Barnet formula as Denbighshire, because we would be looking at a reduction here rather than an increase. But we are where we are, and you know, we're all doing our best. And I think I just want to say a big thank you to the whole team, Team Conway. Thank you, Leader.
Penny?
Thank you, Leader. I thought Councillor Gronway, who's a farmer, should be counting sheep, not figures in his sleep. That surprised me. I agree with everything that's been said today. It's been a really hard process for everybody, and staff are worried and concerned, but it doesn't affect their day job. It doesn't affect the level of energy you see when you go into meetings, how they approach problems, how they approach issues, how they approach certain situations, the support they give us as cabinet members, and the way that they are able to completely keep their professional face on and present all the statistics that we ask for, the continual reports that we ask for. So I said it in the last report, I'm going to say it again. Those councillors who choose not to vote for a balanced budget are essentially not willing to ensure vulnerable individuals, and all who present themselves at our door are not helped but turned away. Thank you, Leader.
Paul.
Thank you, Leader. Just wanted to also acknowledge the work of my fellow councillors who are not on the cabinet, and the scrutiny work that they've done on this. Not always popular with the challenging and questioning that we do, but it is equally important to share that work and to ensure we get to the best place possible. Charlie would have had no doubt that I would have voted, and I will vote at the council, for 9.4%. I actually think it should be a bit higher, because I think we're going to be in for a torrid year, and like all councillors, particularly who are governors, there are some really grim times with some school budgets. But it is what it is. But I think also acknowledge the role of the opposition, because in a sense it's right that they raise those questions and challenge in the way they do. Personally, I would encourage them to be more challenging, but that's their choice. So yeah, just to acknowledge that, because I think you know, ordinary backbench councillors do play their part in getting to where we are today.
No, thank you, Paul. And actually, I did raise that yesterday at scrutiny about raising the role of that committee. I think as we noted, we have really transparent reports. The level of information that members have, the good, the bad, and the ugly, is far superior to that of other councillors. I would say I think constructive scrutiny is really, really important. You, to be fair, have always faced up the consequences of asking for more money to be spent requires more council tax. It is a little bit frustrating when people ignore that consequence, where they'll want lower council tax and less cuts without actually suggesting anything practical about how you bring that together. So that does get a bit frustrating. And I think some people have short memories about decisions they made perhaps when they were sat up here compared to what they're doing when they're sat down there. And I think that does us all a disservice, if I'm honest, because as I said it before, there'll be 22 local authorities, one lot putting the budget forward, the other lot saying this is a disgrace. You don't see that with the NHS, and I just think that does us all a disservice. But yeah, proper scrutiny is vital, and that's just to assure that that happens within this cabinet. On every single thing that's brought forward, we question each other, and we try and come to a position which is balanced and defensible and sensible. So I'll just bring Jeff in, and then I think we'll need to move to the vote.
Thank you, Leader. I think I'm the only one that hasn't spoken so far. So thank you for that. Yeah, foolish is the person that doesn't listen to challenge and doesn't take it on board. And in actual fact, it's a strength that when somebody's actually challenged you, they've read what you've undertaken and they've put that towards you, and it's for you then to address. I've just got to say, what a team to work with. You know, they talk about Team Conway. We are blessed in that respect. Our accounts department is astonishing, and I take on board what the chief exec says. You know, the work they've undertaken to do this and to prepare continually changing figures. If Cronby's seeing figures in sleep, God help what Amanda's got in her head and in sleeping. I have just got to say, in fact, that it's easy to read, it's easy to understand, it makes sense, and we have taken the scrutiny and we have taken the challenge and we have gone through every possible permutation to get the best figure, and that's what's before you, and I'll support it. Thank you.
Jeff, I think it's important to leave the best to last, so that's why we'll finish on that one. So I thank you, members. Thank you for your support. And obviously we will bring this to full council subject to this vote today, and we will make the same case again. So 2.1, just to repeat, is to approve the budget proposal set out in Table 5, Appendix 1, and recommend the budget to council. Councillor, I propose that Councillor Julie has seconded. Can we show for in favour, members? Okay, job help. So agenda item 7 sits within the education portfolio. It's consultation outcome report on the proposed amalgamation of Iskall Glangella and Iskall St Elvod, which you'll find in pages 266 to 302. I'll hand over to Julie. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Leader. So we're presenting to you today 2 school amalgamation proposals. One of those is in Abergele area between Iskall Glangella and Iskall St Elvod, and the other is in Kimmel Bay ward between Iskall Yforid and Iskall Maes Owen. The process of amalgamation that we're following for both similar, and today in your agenda packs, as part of the process, you have the consultation feedback reports for the Abergele and Kimmel Bay areas. Both the junior and infant schools coming together, Iskall Glangella and St Elvod, are neighbouring schools less than a stone's throw away from one another on the same site, and Iskall Yforid and Maes Owen are very similar. Although we are recommending amalgamating 2 schools in 2 areas today, no major physical changes will happen to the sites or buildings as part of this process. There are similarities in the process we're following. However, decisions on each proposal must be carried out separately. So obviously I shall recommend that after. No school reorganisation proposal is taken lightly here in Conway, and we fully understand the complexities, sensitivity and difficult decisions that have to be made as we go through the process, not just for us as officers and members, but also within the school environment and by the governing body. I'd like to thank the schools involved in the process for their cooperation during this consultation period. At the meeting on the 8th of October in 2024, you'll recall that we as Cabinet granted approval to proceed to consult on the proposal to amalgamate Iskall Glangella and Iskall St Elvod and Iskall Maes Owen and Iskall Yforid. The period of consultation commenced on the 21st of October and concluded on the 2nd of December. The purpose of the report is to consider the outcome of the consultation on the proposed amalgamations and to seek Cabinet approval to proceed to the next stage of the process, which is to issue a statutory notice. The consultation followed the School Organisation Code guidelines and included consultation with the learners themselves. The feedback and concluding report is part of your agenda pack today. Our recommendation following analysing the feedback, which was predominantly positive, is to continue with the amalgamation. Our vision is to create 2 outstanding age 3 to 11 primary schools for the Abergele and Kimmel Bay communities, schools where all pupils and staff can thrive, feel happy, cared for, included and celebrated through their primary school years. We have 2 great schools on one site, both in Abergele and in Kimmel Bay, both operating independently of each other. And we have 2 distinct groups of talented staff who currently don't have the opportunity to share that best practice across the schools. So we're asking for members of Cabinet today to support our recommendation, which is to continue with the amalgamation process in both these areas. And you will find, I take you to page 266. She'll just read out the recommendation. So the recommendation is that members approve the issuing of a statutory notice to formally amalgamate Ysgol Glangele and Ysgol St Elfod as one school. And then on page 303.
I think if we can take them separately, I think we'll discuss the first
Okay.
proposal, and then obviously we can do them separately just because it's 2. That's okay.
In which case I proposed that first one with Ysgol.
Perfect.
St Elfod.
Okay, so essentially, you know, we're asking the same thing, but it's only right and proper. We know which ones we're talking about essentially. So, recommendation for Glangele and St Elfod. So I'll open up for any questions, comments, or observations, members. Paul.
This isn't a challenge. It's just a gentle question. Can since we debated this at scrutiny, I'm fully supportive of the amalgamation. No issues about how it was done or anything. It was exemplary. But since then, obviously, governing bodies of both schools have had to interrogate their budget settlements, which are challenging, like lots of schools. And my only slight concern is that the new school, which I understand from the timeline is likely to be open in September 26, that the new school doesn't have a loan liability because of the struggles we've got at the moment at trying to balance our budgets, both St Elfod's and Glangele. So as I say, it is a gentle question, but just a question I think Larry's on, just to alert people, because it is very difficult, obviously, to amalgamate a school in the present circumstances because of the very tight budget settlement, even though it's at a standstill. I understand that, but the implications of that for lots of schools are still very difficult.
So I completely accept where you're coming from, Paul. And obviously, I know that David and the team have been working closely with the schools in order to look at their finances. But obviously, in terms of the amalgamation, as we have done before with amalgamations, there's a certain level of protection that's put in that rolls across a number of years in terms of the impact that reducing budget has by putting both the schools' budgets together. In terms of the loan process, I don't know whether to pass over to Lodi or perhaps to Amanda to.
Larry's online.
Yeah.
Larry, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Paul, for your gentle question. We're working with both respective schools and their governing bodies at the moment, as we would with any other school. So we're advising them in accordance with our financial regulations and the processes that we have in place for supporting any school that is facing a financial challenge. So I'll just reassure you, I think, that we are working with them, and you know, any process that we need to follow with either or of the schools, we will do that.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm aware of that, and I'm aware of a meeting on Friday just to look again at the details of this. So thank you for that.
Right, thanks, Paul. Any other questions, observations, members? No, I guess as I'm a governor at Glengala, I think as Paul raises, the finances are a concern for all our schools moving forward. I think there will be some savings to be made here, but mainly around efficiencies. They won't be substantial, but that's not the bigger drive for me. Clearly, every element of what we do should be as efficient as possible. But I think it's about that standardization of education through the schools. I think it's about driving that educational performance up. Clearly, any school is only as good as its head teacher, but I think there's a real opportunity there for consistently high standards across both schools. I just think it's a bit alien to me in Northern Ireland. They don't have junior and infant schools, so I just find it a bit. I think the concept of 3 through to 11 is something I would support. Is there somebody online? Chris, do you want to go in? Chris, you're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry, I thought I'd unmuted. Yeah, I just wanted to not to allay, but to mention in response to Councillor Paul's comments. I'm a governor at Ysgol Nantygroes, which was I think our first amalgamation within the county, which is the amalgamation of Ysgol Pendorlan and Ysgol Glanamore in Colwyn Bay. And I have to say that was worked excellent. We had in every like with the governing body at every school, I think we all had concerns, all had preconceptions as to the impact that amalgamation could have, both positive and negative. But I would say that it's only been a positive in the outrun, and everything has certainly worked really well. I think the department took that experience into a number of other amalgamations that we've had over the years, and I would say we probably have one of the most experienced education departments now in terms of managing amalgamations. And I would just say to Paul and to all the governors at the schools involved, they know what they're doing and they will work with you. And when problems do arise, they're not, they won't shirk those problems. They will try and help you through them, because that's the experience we certainly had.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. That's very helpful. It's always good to hear lived experience, isn't it, from someone who's gone through it. So we've got a proposal in a second. Just to query, I couldn't attend the scrutiny meeting, but they had an additional recommendation that savings realised from school amalgamations be reinvested into school budgets. Is that into school budgets as a whole or into the school?
Yeah, that's for it to not go into the overall council budget, but for it to remain within the school's budgets, not the school, the two schools. Right. But for it to remain, because obviously whilst that's putting forward opportunities to find savings within schools, that's in the hope that that helps to ease the pressure across all of our schools. That was their proposal.
I've seen Amanda put her glasses on at that remark. Amanda, can we commit to doing that? It's just, obviously I can understand this is a one-off, but it's kind of like, so the amendment, do you want me to read it again?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, I must confess I would feel nervous about you committing to that at this stage without further consideration.
I guess the danger is that the precedent it sets, because this is an individual school, but we're making a decision then that we would de facto have to follow on every single amalgamation moving forward. And actually, what you should have is a policy on that basis. We can't really do it on the hoof. If that's a decision the council wants to undertake, I think that is a separate decision from this. That's what would be my strong advice on this, really. Julie?
Yeah, I understand the argument behind it. Obviously, if they're working hard with schools to reduce, whether that's the number of schools or, you know, in terms of amalgamation or indeed if it's closures at some point, then that's in the hope that those changes will increase the money that's available across education. So if that needs to be a policy change, then that's something I guess that we can propose at some point going forward. But I can understand the reasoning behind it. You know, there's a lot of work that goes in from the schools themselves, from the education department, and the officers involved in that. So, you know, that work is to help across all of our schools to be able to fund them appropriately. So I can understand the reason why the recommendation was put.
Yeah, I'll just bring the chief executive.
Yeah, I also completely understand why it's there. I guess the issue is probably around consistency around all services, because if that was to be applied across all services, you would have proposals for savings that would be ring fenced for that service to reinvest. Now, I know schools are different, but if that's a decision that the council wants to make, that should be a decision globally, not on an individual. This shouldn't open the door to that. It should be something that there's wider considerations for you here. So that I guess, yeah, understanding completely why it's put forward, but I think that a further issue.
Just, you know, I think we all support the concept. We all get what scrutiny's trying to do. I think we have demonstrated year after year how important schools are in terms of the additional support we put into schools. And clearly we want to encourage people to do this willingly. And there's a bit of a carrot and a stick thing there, but I just think with a non-hypothecated budget with any service, that's quite difficult to say you will never take that money from one service to another, because, you know, we might be in this situation this year, but not next year. So I would propose that we just go with the original recommendation, but with the acknowledgement that we support what it's trying to do. But that just would maybe require a policy change before we can actually approve it today. A reasonable compromise, Julie?
Yeah, I just, you know, we're looking at ways, aren't we, of trying to address the increasing demand and pressures on schools. So, you know, yeah, I think it does need to be looked at, because other departments do make savings. Other departments are in a very different position. Often they can increase income. Schools can't do that. They can change their footprint. They can change, obviously, the number of schools that we have in order to try and find additional funding. So yeah, I would like us to look at that at some point. I think it's only right that we do that.
Yeah,
but as of today, you know, obviously I will follow the guidance. I didn't make the proposal.
No. I think we all agree with the it's just the technicalities. We have to be lawful, and we don't have hypothecated budgets, and you know, other budget lines could make the case that we put more money into schools and we put into them. It's just quite a complex area, isn't it? So if members are okay to go with the original recommendation, just to keep things simple and clarify things.
Chair, can you take into account, I think I'm right in saying it was unanimous on the scrutiny committee that we should do
I
that.
think there's unanimous support for it here, but I'm talking on.
Yeah, no, I'm just
Yeah, no,
saying
that's
to
fine.
take
No, I
into
think
account.
we all agree with the concept. We all support the concept, but it would be foolish of us to not put something in there which we could not necessarily follow up at a later date. That's all. I can't see that, but we're taking advice from our officers here at the end of the day. But I think we all support the principle. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. So we'll go with the original proposals. This is Glangella and Elford, which has been proposed by Julie and seconded by me. Did you want to come in, Amanda? Sorry, are you?
No, apologies. I guess I'm just repeating what's already been said. But as I say, you know, I absolutely understand the motivation and principle behind the proposal. I guess, you know, it's just in the context of the council's financial position and its ability to meet balanced budgets in the future. I think it would be very difficult. And I guess the reason I've come back in is because whilst we're saying we agree with the policy in principle, the point being is that I think even when and if that desire for that policy came back, I think I would feel very nervous about us endorsing that kind of policy because of how we would then be hamstringing ourselves in terms of our overall budget position. So I'm not saying there isn't an appropriate compromise to be got, and I absolutely get the sentiment of wanting to recycle money to the benefit of a particular service. I have no issue with that, but the problem is that we can't get to a situation where a decision is taken in one aspect that then leads to the council not being able to set a balanced budget. So I'm merely just making that observation.
Yeah, no, it's what you're paid to do, isn't it, man? That'd be perfectly reasonable. So yeah, thank you for that. But okay, so we'll move back to the original proposal recommendation. Can members show if they're in favour? Okay, so the second report is to schools in Thistle Bay.
I have to leave, but I've read all the reports and I fully support the recommendation.
Okay, Joe Grumley. So we got Escola Forth and Miso, and we're in exactly the same position with that and Gaston. So I'll open up to any questions about specifically Miso and Forth. Any questions or observations? Nigel.
Well, this is something that school amalgamation in town in Kimmel Bay has been on the cards for decades, I would have said. And it's something that I think we need to support. It's the way forward for all schools. We've seen the benefit that it's brought to other schools within the county. And I'm just really pleased that Town and Kimmel Bay are now starting that journey themselves.
Excellent. Always good to have local members support. So any other questions, observations? Julie, I take it you've proposed the amendment?
Yeah, I'm happy to propose the
policy.
recommendation to approve the issuing of a statutory notice to amalgamate Escola Forth and Escola Miso.
Nigel, you'd like to second that? If there's no other questions or observation, members going to show in favour of accepting that recommendation. Okay, so we'll move on to part 3, which is the Gware inter-authority agreement on pages 340 to 416. I just need to bring Matt, our monitoring officer, in at this stage.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. It's just in terms of the recommendations for I suppose, well, it's both technical and I guess practical, really. It's the point around the exact date of termination of the agreement, and I think in order to deal with that issue, the Cabinet might want to add a further recommendation as follows, or a further approval as follows, which is the right to decide on the exact date of termination of the agreement is delegated to the head of the Education Service in consultation with the directors of the other 5 regional authorities, because I don't think we're dealing with the exact date there and how that will be dealt with and delegated. So that's just my advice, Leader.
Okay, members, you're all happy with that? Just a little bit of flexibility around the date. Okay, thanks, Julie. Back to you.
Okay, so this report relates to the withdrawal to the agreement to work in partnership with other North Wales local authorities in the context of the Regional School Effectiveness and Improvement Service, which we all know as GWER. The Regional GWER Service was established in 2013, and there are 4 such consortia across Wales. Last year, the Welsh Government, following a review of roles and responsibilities of education partners in Wales and the delivery of school improvement arrangements, as per Appendix 1 of the report, announced its intention to move away from regional arrangements with a view to having support at a more local level, meaning that the regional agreement is coming to an end. It has now been agreed that the partnership will end on May 31st this year, with each authority taking responsibility on the 1st of June. The withdrawal needs to be formalised by each participating authority, and similar reports have been or will be coming in the forthcoming weeks, presented to cabinets of the 5 other local authorities. A transformation board has been established to bring the current GWER arrangements to a close, with the work transfer services from GWER to authorities ongoing. And as previously noted, the decision has already been made by Welsh Government to terminate partnership agreements. Therefore, the recommendation is that the termination of GWARE partnership is approved and comes to an end, as I said, on the 31st of May, and you will find the recommendations on page 341. However, I'll let Matt perhaps say again in terms of the actual specific wording, but it's basically that members approve termination of the agreement to work in partnership with the other North Wales local authorities in the context of the Regional School Effectiveness and Improvement Service, GWARE, and then whatever bit it was Matt thought should be added in there.
No, just to be clear, Leader, it's an additional recommendation. So
Right,
the recommendation it's to 2.2 and 2.3
Right, 'cause
look
this
fine.
specifies the 31st
Yeah,
of
I
May
understand
here.
that, but I think an additional, the additional recommendation's fine in the context of all those. So,
Or if
yeah,
there is
yeah,
any-
exactly. So, so
Okay.
as I said it earlier, Leader.
Okay, so yeah, in which case then that was on the 31st of May and subsequently dissolved the requirement of the GWARE Joint Committee. And then 2.3, that this council confirms its contractual commitment in relation to ending the arrangement. And then, well, I guess will be 2.4, what Matt said earlier. And I'm happy to move those, Leader.
Okay, actually, any questions from Nigel?
Just wonder whether Amanda's comfortable with 6.2 on page 434. It's the bottom paragraph, I think, the bottom bit.
Yeah. Well, I think in fairness, the service are confident about the proposal in the context of what our new structure will look like as compared to the previous funding arrangements, and you know, that's part of the saving proposals that have come forward. I think there are some residual issues around, I guess, how the whole processes of the dissolution sort of work out, which has risks attached to it. But you know, as I say, otherwise, yes, I'm happy.
Just the bit where it says the actual staffing costs are impossible to predict.
I think it's a 2B cost, transferring it over. Queen Julian.
Yeah, so I think there still needs to be some clarity from Welsh Government in terms of the funding of redundancy costs. It's not been completely clear, and we're waiting for that clarity, which I would hope is imminent. But I have to say thanks to Lodi, because she's worked incredibly hard to ensure that we aren't receiving costs and taking staff that perhaps don't fit what we need in terms of the most appropriate staff for us as a county. Obviously, each county is different and the needs are different across the different areas. But she has worked incredibly hard and sometimes not been necessarily thanked for it. But yeah, I want to say thank you very much. It's been incredibly difficult in a very short space of time, but I'm absolutely confident that anything that we've put forward, and it was put forward at education scrutiny, what our new staffing arrangement will look like, and certainly the first part of that, and it is still a work in progress, but no, I'm very confident. A lot of work has gone into that, but yeah, there does need to be some clarity from Welsh Government in terms of covering the costs of redundancies. There were some that were covered, but we need this obviously as it winds up to understand, and obviously there may be some costs in terms of the buildings that GWARE leased, and coming out of those, and other things like photocopiers, printers, all this kind of thing. You know, it's when you're winding up something that's quite as large as this, then that's significant. But I would hope and I would ask that Welsh Government cover the cost of that, because this again is a policy change that they've introduced. So
Yeah, I think that, you know, it was brought up by Welsh Government in 2013. You do regional working with 6 local authorities. Setup was quite complex body. Last year it was decided that wasn't working. We're going to bring in our own solution. So there's a bit of work to be done, Nigel, on how that actually feeds down and who employs who, and it should be costing them. You know, it's complex essentially. But you know, I know our staff will be looking for financial resilience in everything they do. I think there's an opportunity here to have a more targeted, but it'll be a work in progress, I think, essentially, because even with the 2 authorities working together, there will be areas where we need extra help and stuff. So every confidence in them making this work. But again, not of our doing. You know, it's just it's something we have to deal with, and I think that yeah, I've got every faith in them. But there is some details still to be teased out. Matt, did you want to come back?
Yeah, I'm going to confess, Leader, to just having realised what Councillor Gilly was referring to on the second recommendation, so which is it's right. So 2.2 should in fact, so 2.2 should there is a date there. So 2.2 should stop at. It should be that members approve the termination of the agreement to work in partnership with other North Wales local authorities in the context of the regional school effectiveness and improvement service. Open brackets, square, close brackets, full stop. And then the paragraph that the recommendation that I was suggesting, which is around the date. So you were right about removing the date there. So it can go on and subsequently dissolve the requirement of GWER Joint Committee, but without that date, and then the exact date be delegated to the head of education services in consultation with directors of the other 5 regional authorities. Apologies for that. Chair.
Okay. All right, members, any other questions or observations? Nope. For the proposer, I'm happy to second the recommendations. Nigel, you okay? Yeah, okay. We've got a proposer and a second. Show in favour, members. Okay, thank you. So agenda item 8, exempt items, Local Government Act 1972, Section 100A and Schedule 12A access to information. To consider passing a resolution on the provisions of Section 100A brackets 4 of the above act to exclude the public and press from the meeting during consideration of the following items, as it is likely, if present, there will be disclosure to them of exempt information as defined in paragraph 14 of Part 4 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972. Can somebody propose to move into private session? Emily, Nigel, I'm sure we're in favour. Okay, thank you all. We'll just wait a minute or two until we confirm we're in private session.